Ever wonder how our brains cook up this whole feeling
Well,
thing?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the actual how, the neurons and the chemicals and all that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a trip, right? And today we're diving deep into that, how we even begin to study something as, well, as flighty as emotions.
Right. I mean, it's not like we can just ask someone, so how's your hypothalamus today?
Yeah.
It's also internal.
Exactly. It's a bit like trying to study a dream someone else is having. Lucky for us, though, we've got science to help us out. We'll be taking cues from Chapter 18 of Brain Mechanisms of Emotion.
Perfect. A little brain food for thought. So how do we study something as slippery as feelings, especially, in beings who can't exactly tell us what's up?
It's a bit like detective work, really. We have to look for clues, like those outward signs
Yeah.
with, like, heart racing, sweating, even facial expressions.
So, like, if I see someone go pale, I might think, oh, they look scared.
Right. But couldn't they also be, about to faint? Or maybe they just remembered they left the oven on?
Huh. Good point. Not always a one-to-one thing.
Exactly. It's not always that clear cut. Like, take crying, for example. Are they crying because they're sad, or are they sad because those tears are flowing?
Whoa. Okay, yeah, that's a real head scratcher. Didn't those guys, James and Lange, have a theory about this whole chicken or the egg thing?
They sure did. The James Lange theory basically says we feel emotions because of how our bodies react first.
So it's like our bodies get the memo first, then shoot it over to our brains like, hey, guess what? We're scared now.
Pretty much. Picture this. You stumble upon a bear in the woods, your heart's pounding, palms are sweating, and your brain's all, hold on, this physical freakout must mean I'm terrified.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Especially for those really primal gut-level emotions.
It's a compelling idea, for sure. But, as with most things in neuroscience, it's not the whole story.
Ooh, a plot twist.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Enter the Cannon-Bard theory. They came in with a little counterpoint.
Hit me with it. What did Cannon and Bard have to say?
Well, they were all about that happening at the same time energy. They figured the emotional experience and the physical reaction are, like, simultaneous.
Okay, so less of a cause and effect thing and more like a perfectly timed duet.
Precisely. Their theory points to the thalamus. It's this relay station in the brain, and they believed it sends out those signals for both the physical and emotional responses in sync.
So it's like our brain is conducting this whole symphony of sensations and feelings all at once. I like it. But how do we know which theory is closer to the truth?
Right, and that's where things get really interesting. There's actually evidence supporting both sides of this debate. Take, for example, the research on how different cultures experience emotions physically. Have you heard about that study about butterflies in the stomach?
Oh, yeah. That one always stuck with me. It's like, even though we each experience emotions in our own way, our bodies have this sort of universal language for them, don't they?
Exactly. If researchers found that people from all walks of life, all over the world, tend to map emotions onto specific bodily sensations in really similar ways.
So even if we don't always have the same words for these feelings, our bodies are speaking a language everyone understands.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it?
So it sounds like it's not a one-way street, right? This whole emotion-body connection. You got it. It's more like a constant conversation between the body and brain. And you know what? There's even more to it than that. It turns out we might not always be aware of the emotions we're feeling.
Wait, really? Like feeling something without even realizing it? That's kind of wild.
It is pretty wild.
Ugh.
For a long time, scientists were pretty sure that, we had to consciously perceive something to actually feel an emotion about it. But then came this whole thing about unconscious emotions.
Okay, you're going to have to break this one down for me. Unconscious emotions. That sounds kind of ominous.
I guess it does sound kind of ominous, doesn't it? But really, it's just another layer of complexity in how our brains work. So imagine this. You're shown a bunch of faces, right? Some are angry, some are just neutral, but they flash by so fast you don't even consciously register seeing them.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Speedy faces. What happens next?
Here's the thing. Even though people didn't consciously see the angry faces, their bodies still reacted. They had this subtle fear response, like their brains were picking up on a threat they weren't even aware of.
Oh, so like a subconscious alarm bell going off.
Exactly. And it suggests that some of our emotional responses, especially those tied to survival instincts like fear, they might be wired pretty deep in the brain, deeper than that whole conscious thought process.
That's incredible. It's like our brains have this whole secret back channel for processing emotions, But how does that even work? Where's all this happening in the brain?
Well, for a while there, scientists thought they'd found the answer. The limbic system, this network of brain structures, sometimes even called the emotional brain.
Ah, yes, the limbic system. I've heard the name. It's like the brain's very own feeling center, right?
And that's what they thought. But like with most things in neuroscience, it's not that simple.
Of course not. Brains are never that straightforward. So what's the real story with the limbic system then?
It's not that it's not involved in emotions, it definitely is. It's just that it's not the only thing. More like a key player in a much bigger, more intricate system. One part of the limbic system that's often in the spotlight, though, is the amygdala. Ever heard of it?
Oh, the amygdala. That name comes up all the time when I'm reading about emotions. What's so special about it? Why is it always in the mix?
Well, this little almond-shaped structure is like the ultimate networker. It gets input from all our senses,
Hmm.
sight, sound, smell, the works. It's like it's constantly scanning our environment for anything that might be, emotionally charged. And when it comes to fear, well, the amygdala is basically our brain's personal alarm system.
Okay, so it's like the lookout tower, always on high alert for anything that might set off those alarm bells.
Precisely. And there were these really interesting studies done with monkeys way back when. They removed part of the temporal lobe, which is where the amygdala lives.
Oh, right, I think I read about those. A little ethically questionable these days, but still fascinating results, right? What did they find?
Well, the monkeys became incredibly tame. Like, they just didn't seem to experience fear the same way anymore. They'd walk right up to things that would normally send them running, like snakes or even bigger monkeys.
Wow, it's like their fear switch was just off.
Pretty much. It's called Kluver-Bucy syndrome, and it was a huge clue for researchers that the amygdala is deeply involved in how we experience fear.
That's incredible. So no amygdala, no fear, case closed.
Well, not quite. It gets even more interesting. See, it's not just about those, instinctive, hardwired fear responses. The amygdala also seems to be really important for what's called learned fear.
Learn fear, like fear with a side of experience. Tell me more.
Okay, imagine this. You have a bad experience. Let's say you get bitten by a dog. Ouch. Right. Well, your amygdala takes note of that. It starts building a connection in your brain between, say, the sight of a dog and that feeling of fear you felt when you got bitten.
So the next time you see a dog, even if it's like the friendliest pup ever, that amygdala is going to be like, oh, remember what happened last time?
Exactly. It's like your brain's way of trying to protect you, avoiding danger based on past experience. Of course, sometimes those associations can get a little out of hand, and that's where phobias and anxieties can pop up. But at its core, it's a pretty handy survival mechanism.
Definitely. So the amygdala's got that fear department covered. But what about other emotions? Like what happens in my brain when I'm feeling that, let's say thrilled is not the right word, enraged by traffic? Is that the amygdala again, or is there a whole other control panel for anger? So the amygdala's got that fear department covered. But what about other emotions? Like what happens in my brain when I'm feeling of that, let's say thrilled is not the right word, enraged by traffic? Is that the amygdala again, or is there a whole other control panel for anger?
Ah, anger. Yeah, that one's a bit more complex than just the amygdala sending out a distress signal. We got to talk about aggression, too.
Okay, so anger and aggression, two sides of the same coin.
Sort of. Think of it this way. Anger is the feeling itself, that surge of grr you get inside. Aggression is more about what you do with it, the action.
So if someone cuts me off and I feel that flash of road rage, that's amygdala territory.
Yeah.
But if I, hopefully not, slam on my horn or, make some unfortunate hand gestures, that's the aggression taking over.
You got it. It's like a chain reaction almost. And to make it even more interesting, aggression isn't just one thing either. There are different types of aggression: predatory, affective, each with its own little brain signature, you could say.
Okay, now you're really making my brain work. Different types. Give me an example.
Sure. Predatory aggression, that's more like, say, a lion stalking a gazelle. It's about hunting, survival. Then you've got affective aggression. Think of two cats in a standoff, all hissy and puffed up. It's more about dominance, sending a message.
Okay, I'm seeing the difference. So two different flavors of aggression, each with its own, evolutionary purpose, I'm guessing.
Exactly. And they even involve different parts of the brain. That's where another one of our brain's ancient structures comes in, the hypothalamus.
Ah, the hypothalamus. Isn't that like the body's control center for all sorts of things? Temperature, hunger.
Yep, that's the one.
Pain.
And it's a major player in that whole fight or flight response, which, as you can imagine, overlaps a lot with aggression.
Right. So how does the hypothalamus know whether to go with, lion stalking a gazelle mode or cat in a standoff mode.
Well, there was this fascinating research back in the day where they stimulated different parts of the hypothalamus in cats.
Oh no, not the cats.
Don't worry, they were well cared for. But the amazing thing was, depending on which little spot they stimulated, they could trigger either that quiet, predatory stalking behavior or that more explosive, hissy kind of aggression.
Wow, that's amazing. So literally flipping a switch between those two different aggression modes. But come on, we're not cats, right? Do those same areas of the brain work the same way in humans?
Good point. We're definitely more complex than our feline friends. Human aggression, well, it's a whole other can of worms. We've got social factors, cultural norms, all that higher order thinking getting in the mix. But it is interesting to see these ancient primal circuits still humming along in our brains, influencing those split-second reactions before we even have time to overthink things.
It's kind of humbling in a way, right? To think that even with all our fancy human brains, we've still got these ancient systems calling some of the shots.
It really is. But hey, it's not all fight or flight and hissing. Our brains have some pretty impressive chill-out mechanisms, too. Ever heard of serotonin?
Serotonin, of course. Isn't that the happy hormone?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. But yes, serotonin is definitely involved in regulating mood. It's a neurotransmitter, basically a chemical messenger that helps brain cells communicate. And it plays a role in all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Mood, sleep, appetite, and yeah, even aggression.
So it's like the brain's built-in peacekeeper.
You could say that. The idea is that when serotonin levels are low, we might be more likely to have those, let's say, impulsive reactions. There's a whole theory about it called the serotonin deficiency hypothesis. Basically, less serotonin, less chill.
Makes sense. So to avoid those road rage incidents, I just need to keep my serotonin levels topped up.
If only it were that simple. You see, there are different types of serotonin receptors in the brain, and they all do different things. It's not just about how much serotonin you have, but how it's being used, where it's going in the brain, all of that.
Man, brains are complicated.
They really are. It's like this intricate dance between all these different systems, chemicals, and connections. And honestly, we're still figuring out all the steps.
So even with all the amazing technology we have now, brain imaging and all that, there's still so much we don't know about emotions.
Absolutely. But that's what makes it so fascinating, right? We're constantly learning new things, refining our understanding of how these incredible organs give rise to the whole human experience. And it makes you wonder,
All right.
will we ever truly understand what it's like to experience the world through another being's emotions? I mean, really know what it feels like to be in their shoes, so to speak. It makes you think.
It really does. It's like emotions are this whole other language. We could study the words, the grammar, all of that, but can we ever truly speak it the way someone else does? It's a bit of a mind bender. But hey, that's what makes these deep dives so much fun, right? Always something new to ponder.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've done enough brain bending for one day. But hey, listeners, keep those questions coming and we'll keep exploring. Until next time, keep those minds curious.